Here this week with Alex Tapscott, Don's son and co-author of The Blockchain Revolution. Please join me in welcoming Don Tapscott.
Well, thank you very much. Welcome to the Blockchain Davos. It's actually two things. It's the first Davos of the Trump era, and he's the elephant in the room. He's actually the elephant not in the room. And I do have to credit my wife, Anna, who gave me that line, but it's sort of gone viral in an article I wrote. But the other elephant is this blockchain thing. There are at least a dozen sessions, and I'm participating on the formal agenda, the private agenda, and in events like this. And blockchain is kind of like an elephant in the sense of the old parable of the blindfolded person and the elephant. You think about something like Bitcoin as an asset. It goes up and down in value, and that's one way that we can look at this. If you're interested in speculating in assets, then that may be of interest to you. More broadly, we've got a new age of cryptocurrencies that are not based on nation states, and that becomes more interesting. But the real pony here is the underlying technology of cryptocurrencies called the blockchain. And I've become convinced, along with my son Alex, we've been researching this for several years, that the way to look at this is none of the previous. This is really the second generation of the internet. So let me explain that, and I'd like to make a single argument to you that this technology can be at the heart of solving the biggest problem essentially discussed at Davos, which is this growing inequality gap and the prosperity paradox. That we have wealth creation, but we don't have prosperity. So let me get into it. Oh, by the way, full disclosure, I have a real bias about WISeKey. I love this company. And they're doing the most creative thing today. Do you know about this? Well, it'll be explained later. But those of you who got books, they're cryptographically signed. So you can take an app and scan the book, and it authenticates whether or not it's a real book. And then that enables you to do all kinds of other things that have never been done before with a book. They've been done before with things like diamonds or Bulgari watches. So how appropriate that the next in the line is my new book. And thank you, by the way, for buying the large numbers of the book, because the way to buy this book is in massive volume, okay? Is Christmas that far away? You look like people with friends. No, seriously. For the last 40 years, we've had the Internet of Information. And when I send you some information, I'm actually not sending you the information. I'm sending you a copy, a PDF, a PowerPoint, an email. Even with a website, I retain the original. We've all had a printing press. That's democratized information that's been great. But when it comes to the things that make the economy work, things of value, assets, like money, stocks, bonds, intellectual property, our identities, votes, art, music, energy, loyalty points. Sending a copy is a terrible idea. If I send you 100 Swiss francs, it's really important that I don't still have the money, and that I can't send it to you and to you and to you. And this has been called the double spend problem by cryptographers for a long time. So the way that we handle this problem in our economy, the way that we establish trust between parties to move and manage and exchange assets, is through large intermediaries, banks, credit card companies, social media companies, governments. They perform all the transaction and business logic of every kind of commerce. They authenticate the parties, they clear and settle transactions, and overall they keep records and establish trust. Now they've done a pretty good job, but there are growing problems. First is that they're all based on traditional server technology, which can be hacked. And everybody from JP Morgan to, well, I guess the Democratic Party found that out the hard way. Sometimes they behave badly, and 2008 was a great example of that, where they almost brought down the whole global capitalist system. We were days, some people say hours away from the ATMs running out of money in the United States. They exclude a couple of billion people from the global economy and can't afford a bank account. They slow things down. It takes a second for an email to go around the world, but it can take days or even weeks for money in banking systems to move down the street of New York. They tax the system. It can cost 10, 15, even 20% to send money from one country to another. And the biggest problem is that they capture all of this data and they hold it, they monetize it. We create it, but they get to benefit. And the result is that the largesse of the digital age has become asymmetrical, and a tiny handful of people and governments and companies have captured most of the value. What if there were not just an internet of information, what if there were an internet of value, a native digital medium for value? Some kind of global distributed ledger or database or spreadsheet where anything of value from money to stocks to votes could be stored, managed, exchanged, secured in a way that's private, but it's also in a way that we can deliver transparency to society. Well, as most of you know, in 2008, an anonymous person or persons named Satoshi Nakamoto wrote a paper outlining a protocol for a digital cash that she called Bitcoin. And this enabled people to transact peer-to-peer for the first time ever and to trust each other, even though you may not even know who the other party is. And this has set off a prairie storm. Now, I must confess, it took me a few years before I figured out what is going on here. But Bob Dylan, there's something going on here and you don't know what it is. This is the most important technology of a generation. It's the biggest innovation in computer science underway. Now people say, well, what about artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, and all these kinds of things? They're all critical technologies, but insofar that they will be part of the economy, the blockchain is the platform for everything. When that light buys some power from a distributed power source, it's not going to go through the Visa network to do the transaction. And the record of the reputation of that light as a light that pays for power is not going to be stored in a bank. It's going to be stored on a distributed ledger. The Internet of Everything needs a ledger of everything. And the same thing, if there are autonomous vehicles moving around that have machine learning built into them, all of those transactions, everything from where they get their power to booking them to the payment systems and so on, will all be handled by a blockchain ledger. So this is the new commercial and transactional foundation of the new economy. Now most people, please have a seat. Most people think about this as fintech. And that's not what it is. It is fintech, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. But let me give you one sort of financial industry example. Have any of you heard of a Rube Goldberg machine? You know this guy was an engineer and a cartoonist, and he designed these super complicated machines, ridiculously complicated, that would do a simple thing like crack an egg or open a door. Kind of reminds me of the banking system, doesn't it? I mean, you tap your card in a Starbucks, and a bunch of messages go through 8 or 9 companies, some of them using 1970s mainframes, and then 3 days later, a settlement for that transaction occurred and somebody gets paid. What if you had a blockchain basis for the financial system? There would be no 3-day settlement, period, and no counterparty risk for every one of those 8 companies, because the payment and the settlement would be the same activity, just be a change in the database. That would radically transform the metabolism of the financial industry, reduce risk, and have all kinds of other benefits. So companies are struggling with this. Down the hall, I've been speaking to some of the executives of the big accounting firms. Double entry accounting was the foundation of capitalism and the creation of a corporation. Well, when you have blockchain-based accounting, you have a debit, a credit, and a third entry automatically goes onto the blockchain. So the idea of having an audit every year and paying these companies millions or tens of millions of dollars to do it, that's going to go away. Because you want an audit, it's a real-time record of, and it's not a sample that you rely on the company to tell you what's going on. It's a population. It's a real-time record of everything that occurred. So let me make one big point to you to wrap this up. Prosperity. Crazy. We have wealth creation, we have declining prosperity for the first time in modern history. How do we solve this problem? Well, we all watched the American election. There were two different perspectives. The Clinton perspective was, if you have social inequality, you need to make things more equal, and the way to do that is to tax the rich. Donald Trump, on the other hand, said, no, these old economy companies are being wiped out. We can bring them back. And we can stop globalization by having protectionism, focus more internally, reduce taxes, especially for corporations and wealthy people, to generate more money into the economy. Now, setting aside the relative merits of each of those perspectives, let me argue for a third perspective that has to do with blockchain. Rather than the redistribution of wealth to solve this problem, could we pre-distribute wealth? Could we democratize the economy? Could we